Hi, I'm H.M. Bouwman, and this is my new book, Scattergood. Scattergood is published by Neil Porter Books at Holiday House. And in this book, it's 1941. World War II is going on. But we're in the middle of Iowa, in West Branch, Iowa, which is a small farming town near Iowa City. Peggy, our main character, is 12 years old, going on 13. And as far as she can tell, nothing exciting has ever happened in West Branch, Iowa. But things are about to happen. 1941 for Peggy is the year that a lot of things go wrong. Her parents aren't getting along. She's having trouble at school. She doesn't feel like she fits in. But the thing that sets everything off is that in the summer of 1941, she finds out that her cousin and best friend is sick. I'm going to read from the opening chapter of Scattergood. June 1941, Month 1. Chapter 1, Something Thrilling. A barn is almost the best place in the world to think if you live on a farm and have nowhere else to go. Everything in a barn has a use. Everywhere you look there is a job to do, or just done. Stalls mucked out, straw scattered thin and even, shovels hung on their hooks. Cows shrug at flies, patiently waiting for whatever end of the world might come. Nothing in a barn worries, not about dust storms that might return someday, or wars in Europe that might spread to America, or best friends who might be sick. I sat milking, back to back with my dad, each of us leaning a shoulder into a cow's greasy hide, clipping through chores before we headed over to my cousin Delia's for her late birthday party. And then my dad told me, over the hissing in our respective buckets, that Delia had leukemia. The 3 barn cats hunched at our feet hoping for a squirt, but I didn't help them out. What do you mean, leukemia? Everyone had been upheaved about Delia lying in the hospital in Iowa City, but now she was home, and things would be back to normal. Delia and I would help our dads in the fields and our moms in the kitchens, and we'd swim in the creek, and we'd avoid our annoying neighbor Ida Jean as much as we could, and Delia would read me long passages from books about girls who wanted to be authors, and she'd write poetry that didn't make sense, and I'd pretend to appreciate it, even though we both knew that I did not. It would be a good summer. What do you mean? I said again, finishing with my cow and turning all the way around. Dad took his time to answer. The cats mewed impatiently. Means she's pretty darn sick. How sick? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the sickest. It didn't make sense. The hospital wouldn't have sent Delia home if she wasn't improved. Silence. Then he looked over his shoulder at me, one hand on the cow's flank. Harriet lowed. She didn't like pauses in her routine. He started the rhythmic pulling again. He cleared his throat and pressed his forehead into Harriet's side, squeezing her teats repeatedly until the milk slowed down. Leukemia is pretty serious. He didn't look over at me, not even when he finished with Harriet. Leukemia. I'd heard the word but didn't know much of what it meant, except that it meant serious. I'd never known anyone to get it. But I couldn't think of how to ask everything I wanted to know, and my dad had moved on to the next cow. When I got to Delia's house, early, to help set up the party, Uncle Ed waved from outside the barn, shovel in hand. Instead of going inside, which was busy with women, I wished I could join him in some quiet cleaning of the pig pens. But I veered toward the house, carrying warm bread and old sheets, and by the time I slipped into the side door and stood in the washroom, I knew I couldn't just waltz into the kitchen and start working like nothing was wrong. I had to see Delia, to see how sick she really was. In the kitchen, on the other side of the door, Ida Jean murmured something, and the women laughed and clucked, and her mother said, "That girl draws boys like honey," and that decided me. I laid the bread and the sheets on the sill and took the other door, up the stairs in sock feet. Upstairs was hotter than down. I don't know why the Bible says hell is below. Delia was sitting on top of the covers in her thin nightgown, a glisten of sweat on her bare arms. She must have felt good enough to read, because she had a book propped up in front of her face. But the book was Little Women, which she'd already read about a dozen times, so she must not have felt too good. When I had the flu, I reviewed old pages in my math book, and I'm guessing Little Women was like that for Delia, reading, but with the brain turned off. She lowered the novel as soon as I came in the room, and her eyes, bigger than life-size through her thick glasses, crinkled up at the corners. "Peggy! I thought I wouldn't see you so soon. She grinned and laid down the book, still open to her page. You sneaked. Joe March would approve. I'd never read Little Women, but Delia had told me all about Joe March, who sounded like the only decent one of all the sisters. 2 summers earlier, when I was almost 11 and she was 12 and she decided to become a writer. It was the summer our mothers taught us to sew, something the March girls also did in their book. Delia insisted that during sewing time I had to call her Jo. I was expected to play the other 3 sisters, which was hard since I couldn't keep them all apart, all while Delia carefully ruined her stitches and discussed the astounding wealth of a boy named Laurie, even though in real life the only boy near us is our neighbor and schoolmate, Joe Clark. It was a long and confusing summer filled with crooked hems, and it was followed by the autumn of Anne of Green Gables, difficult in its own way, since it involved me pushing Delia down the creek in a raft while she recited poetry and Joe and Ida Jean laughed on the bank. At least crooked hems took place in private. Peggy, Delia said, and I realized I'd been daydreaming. The silence had stretched too far. Happy birthday. That was 2 weeks ago. Welcome back then. How are you? I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. Hot. She waved a zigzag paper. Sammy made me a fan. It's probably cooler outside. She kept fanning. I'm not allowed downstairs until the party. The doctors say I'm susceptible to infection, so Mom's treating me like I'm John Keats. Is that from Anne of Green Gables? She sighed. Like I'm an invalid. She says I have to stay in bed and away from germs. Honestly, I'm better now. You are? I'm just a little anemic, she said. When you're older, you'll know what I mean. It sometimes happens to women. Women? She was 14 as of 3 weeks ago. Also, my dad had said leukemia, and anemia didn't sound bad enough for the way he talked in the barn. Delia folded the fan inside Little Women like a bookmark and closed the novel. Tell me everything that's happened while I've been away. She'd been in the hospital in Iowa City for 2 whole weeks. You'd think something would have occurred during that time, but it hadn't. Even though West Branch, Iowa is the birthplace of a president, nothing happens here. Well, we harvested alfalfa. Peggy. Delia's voice had a dangerous corn tassel silk quality to it that meant I was being stupid. Tell me something I don't already know. Something exciting. But that was the problem. Harvest was good this spring. We managed to make hay in pure sunshine and we beat most of the leafhoppers, but it wasn't anything new. I thought hard. That was really it until your party today. Oh, I started writing my essay for English next fall. What? She gaped, and I knew I'd grabbed a good topic. I want to do well in high school. I was the youngest person in our grade by more than a year. So I need a good grade in English, which I can do if I perfect my essay over the summer. I read that autobiography. Stop. You mean Benjamin Franklin? I nodded. Our summer reading assignment. Mr. Laughlin said, remember? I remember. I started the book before I went to the hospital. She wrinkled her nose. Boring and unpoetic. But how do you know the writing assignment will be Franklin? It's been the 9th grade fall essay topic for the past 6 years. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already written the essay once. This was my second try. In May, I gave my draft to Mr. Laughlin, our junior high English teacher, so that he could tell me what to fix and I could get a good grade in the fall in my high school class. And Mr. Laughlin read it and sighed. When he finished, he handed the paper back and told me that because I was so much younger than my classmates and really should be going into 8th grade or maybe even 7th grade rather than 9th grade, he tells me this every opportunity he can. I didn't yet understand Franklin. I told Delia that Mr. Laughlin had said that replicating Franklin's experiment to produce a perfect life, which I had done, a 13-day run through each of his 13 virtues, documented with charts and graphs and repeated to validate the test, was not, he said, the point of reading the great man's autobiography because, quote, life can't be quantified, end quote. First of all, I'm only a year younger than my classmates, maybe a little more than a year for some of them, but not 2 years. Second, I'm smart. I can understand Franklin. But Delia liked what the teacher said. Life, she repeated, can't be quantified. Nodding in agreement, she took off her glasses. That's right, Peggy. Life is so much better than any prediction we can make. And we ourselves are constantly expanding. Not like graphs or charts, she said, like flowers. She twirled her glasses in her fingers and her eyes lit up like they always do when she says things that don't make sense. Delia wanted to be a poet, which made her talk funny. Do you understand? She said. I said yes, mostly to make her stop staring. Her eyes were bright blue and they could burn a hole right through you. Like me, Delia had mousy brown hair and a body that hadn't yet figured out how to curve, even though she was older. Unlike me, she actually had a best feature: those eyes. She knew it too, which is why when she wanted to look authorly and make pronouncements, she removed her glasses. "I'm speaking metaphorically," she said. "I need to get downstairs before I get in trouble for not helping." "You need to understand metaphor," said Delia, still twirling her spectacles. "I'll see what I can do." "Hey," she said, "here's a better assignment for you this summer, especially since I'm stuck in bed. Experience something thrilling, and then tell me all about it." She pushed her glasses back on her nose, retrieved her writer's notebook from under her pillow, and started scribbling. Sitting there, she was like a picture of herself, happy and in good health. But my stomach refused to unknot. I understand graphs and charts, and even though she doesn't think I do, I know what a metaphor is too, but I had no idea what Delia meant by us expanding like flowers. This is why she and I were never kindred spirits, as Delia would say, but merely cousins and friends. And even though she sometimes thought I was a baby, we really were friends. Unlike our neighbor Ida Jean, Delia wasn't always talking about boys and being cute, and if I said something that didn't make sense to her, she didn't make fun. Sometimes she even wrote down things I said in her writer's notebook, as if I was interesting. Also, there was always something new happening in her head, and she had the best laugh, like church bells, but more screechy, like church bells if church bells were wicked. She hadn't laughed at all today. I wanted her to laugh again. Thank you. That's Scattergood.